This channel talks about movies in slow, clear English to help you practice your English listening comprehension. What would happen if you accidentally traveled 30 years into the past and had to make sure your own parents fell in love or you'd never be born? Let's talk about Back to the Future. Let's start with the story. Marty McFly is an ordinary teenager in 1985, living with a family that's struggling in different ways. His father is walked over by almost everyone around him, and the household generally feels stuck, without much hope that anything is ever going to improve. Marty's closest friend is Doc Brown, an eccentric local scientist who has just finished building something extraordinary, a time machine built out of a modified sports car. Before Marty is even involved, Doc successfully tests the machine using his own dog, sending the animal exactly 1 minute into the future in front of Marty's own eyes. Doc is convinced his invention is going to work, and moments after switching it on, a stray plutonium delivery goes badly wrong, forcing Marty to escape by driving the car itself, accidentally sending him 30 years into the past. Going to here describes a prediction based on solid evidence right in front of you, not a random guess. Doc has clearly tested and calculated this. Marty lands in 1955 in the same small town decades earlier, and quickly runs into two teenagers who turn out to be his own parents, George and Lorraine, long before they ever got married. Marty accidentally changes history the moment he arrives by distracting the car that was originally meant to hit George, meaning Lorraine ends up rescuing Marty instead of George. From this point on, Marty is certain the timeline will unravel completely unless he can fix what he's broken. Will here expresses a strong belief or prediction about what's going to happen based on reasoning rather than something he can currently see. Worse still, Lorraine develops an immediate romantic interest in Marty himself, completely unaware that he's actually her future son. Marty realizes that if his parents don't fall in love at their school dance exactly as they originally did, he and his siblings simply won't exist in the future at all. Won't is the negative form of will, used here for a serious, high-stakes negative prediction rather than a small, everyday one. Marty tracks down a younger version of Doc Brown in 1955 and explains the entire situation, including exactly where he's actually from. Doc is initially skeptical, but becomes convinced once Marty proves what he knows about events that haven't happened yet. From here, Doc is certain that returning Marty to 1985 will require an enormous, very specific amount of electrical power. Will require is another confident prediction, based on Doc's own calculations about how the time machine works. Together, they work out a way to try to generate that power using a lightning strike due to hit the town's clock tower on a very specific night. Meanwhile, Marty spends the rest of the film trying to engineer his parents' first proper meeting. Convinced that George won't ever approach Lorraine confidently on his own. Won't fits perfectly here, since it's describing what Marty predicts is very unlikely to happen without help. Complicating things further, the local bully, Biff spends much of the film making George's life miserable, forcing Marty to intervene directly to protect his own future father's confidence and self-respect. Marty eventually convinces George that standing up for himself is going to change everything about how people see him. And by the night of the dance, George finally does exactly that, standing up to Biff in front of the entire school in a moment that reshapes his whole future. Going to here reflects Marty's confident prediction, based on what he's already observed about how people react to George. At that dance itself, Marty has to actually perform in the school band at the last minute to keep the evening on track, all while racing against a fading photograph that shows his own existence slowly disappearing. In one memorable moment, Marty gets so caught up in the performance that he plays a style of music the audience has clearly never heard before, decades ahead of when it will actually become popular. As George and Lorraine finally share their first kiss, the photograph in Marty's pocket begins to restore itself, and Marty is confident he will exist again after all. Will exist is a clear, simple future prediction about a specific personal outcome finally becoming likely again. With history corrected, Marty rushes to the clock tower for the lightning strike, successfully powering the time machine and returning to 1985, right before the accident that started the whole story. Back in his own time, Marty discovers that changing one small night in the past has completely transformed his family's future for the better. His father is confident and successful, and the household feels entirely different than the one he left that morning. Doc arrives moments later, insisting that Marty and his girlfriend will need to come with him because, in his own words, some very serious trouble is on its way. Will need is yet another future prediction, setting up the very next adventure. Now, let's talk about how this story is told, and why its central idea has stayed so influential for 4 decades. Robert Zemeckis structures the whole film around visual predictions and payoffs. A photograph that changes, a clock tower with a specific countdown-style deadline, and a plot that constantly asks the audience to predict what a small change today might cause tomorrow. The film also treats time travel refreshingly simple for a general audience. Rather than getting lost in complicated theory, it focuses entirely on cause and effect that's easy to follow, which is a big part of why it's remained so accessible to new viewers, generation after generation. Comedy and genuine stakes are also balanced carefully throughout, so that even during its silliest jokes, the underlying threat to Marty's own existence never completely disappears from view. Alongside our main focus on future predictions, this episode also has 5 bonus vocabulary words for you, pulled from how critics and fans have actually described this film. Our first word is iconic. Iconic describes something so famous and well recognized that it becomes a symbol of an entire era or genre. The time-traveling car in this film is now one of the most iconic vehicles in movie history. Our second word is timeless. Timeless describes something that doesn't feel outdated, no matter how many years pass. Critics frequently call this film timeless, since it still plays well for audiences who weren't even born when it was released. Our third word is paradox. A paradox is a situation that seems to contradict itself, especially one involving two things that can't logically both be true. Much of the film's tension comes from the paradox of a character accidentally becoming responsible for his own parents falling in love. Our fourth word is franchise. A franchise is a connected series of films, games, or other media, usually sharing characters or a setting. This film's success turned it into a hugely popular franchise, with 2 further films following soon after. Our fifth and final word is influential. Influential describes something that has a strong, lasting effect on other work that comes after it. This film is regularly described as hugely influential on the entire time travel genre in cinema and television. Now, let's talk about how Back to the Future has actually been received, and why people are still discussing it 40 years after its release. Critically, the response was extremely strong from the very beginning, and has barely faded since. The film holds a 93% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes, alongside an even higher 95% audience score. Genuinely rare agreement across 4 decades of viewers. Commercially, the film was a phenomenon on release, earning close to $400 million worldwide, against a budget of only around $19 million, becoming one of the biggest hits of 1985, and spawning 2 sequels that continued the story into the future, and further into the past. Much of the ongoing discussion around this film focuses on just how well its central cause and effect idea has aged. Viewers and critics alike frequently point to the fading photograph as one of the most effective, simple visual metaphors for consequences ever put in a mainstream film. Interestingly, the franchise's reputation for predictions grew even further with its first sequel, which imagined a specific future date and became famous in its own right for guessing at future technology, some of it surprisingly close to accurate, decades later. The film's cultural standing was formally recognized in 2007, when it was selected for preservation in the United States National Film Registry, an honor reserved for films considered culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. Online, discussion of the original film today tends to focus on a few recurring topics. Whether its central time travel logic actually holds up under close inspection, its lasting influence on countless later time travel stories, and its continued presence on greatest films ever made lists published by critics and audiences alike. Let's go through the future tense forms from this episode. Going to. Used for a prediction based on evidence you can already see or already know. Doc is going to test the time machine tonight. Will. Used for a prediction, belief, or confident expectation about the future, especially without solid evidence right in front of you. Marty believes the timeline will fix itself. Or, Marty is sure he will exist again. Won't. The negative form of will, used for negative predictions. George won't stand up for himself without help. Try making your own predictions about something using will or going to, choosing whichever one actually fits your evidence. Let's also go through our 5 bonus vocabulary words from this episode. Iconic. So famous it becomes a symbol of an entire era. The DeLorean is one of cinema's most iconic vehicles. Timeless. Not feeling outdated, no matter how many years pass. Critics call this film timeless. Paradox. A situation that seems to contradict itself. The story is built around a genuine paradox. Franchise. A connected series of films or media sharing characters or a setting. The film's success launched a franchise. Influential. Having a strong, lasting effect on later work. This film was hugely influential on the entire genre. Try using one of these 5 words yourself, either to describe this film or another story that stayed relevant for decades. So, what's the final verdict on Back to the Future? 40 years on, it still holds up as one of the most purely enjoyable adventure comedies ever made, with a plot that's genuinely clever, without ever feeling complicated. If you enjoy a story that takes a simple idea and follows its consequences all the way through, with real charm and humor along the way, this is very much worth your time, whether you're revisiting it or watching for the very first time. It's also a genuinely useful film for English learners specifically, since much of its plot is driven by characters stating clear, confident predictions about what will or won't happen next. Did you enjoy Back to the Future? Let me know in the comments on the video, or get in touch. If this helped you improve your English today, subscribe on YouTube, or follow along on Spotify or Apple Podcasts for more movies reviewed in slow, clear English. Interactive learning materials for this lesson can be found for free on engmoviereviews.com.